Superb. So thank you all and welcome back again to our monthly meeting where we have discussion about property and how we can all utilize all these different strategies to help each other, to help ourselves, to help reach whatever goals that we're looking to set. So this week or this month rather, we've got the amazing Sanchia who's decided to come and share her journey. And we're going to be discussing about her property journey from when she was a lawyer and decided to become a property investor. This is going to be interesting because I know a lot of you guys have a lawyer as one of the, one of those jobs that everyone wants to be, like become a lawyer or become a doctor, and that's like the pinnacle of success. And then Sanchia decided to change that and decide to be a property investor. So we all want to hear why on earth you would do that when everyone wants to be where you were. So it's going to be interesting. So the way that we're going to set this up, guys, is we're going to have a discussion with Sanchia. We're going to listen to the story. We're going to get to a point where we will allow all of you guys to ask your questions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And if we need any clarity, we will unmute you and ask you to just explain anything else that you might want to. So we'll do that at the back end of the interview, essentially. And welcome to anyone who might be new. So we are the Zim Property Investors. You can find more information about us on our Facebook group if need be, or just feel free to reach out to myself or any of the members that are in the group here. Just drop a message in the chat and we will get in touch with you for any more clarity. So we're going to get started then and have a chat with Sanchia, and let's hear her story. So how are you, Sanchia?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you here, and I'll speak for the rest of the family here that it's going to be really intriguing to hear your story. So if you want to start with just telling us a little bit about yourself, who is Sanchia? Where are you from? How did you get to a point where you started property, or beforehand, really?
So yes, my name is Sanchia Miller. I'm based in the Midlands, and this is where I live and also operate in terms of my property management portfolio. In terms of my background, I think we'll probably delve into that a bit later, but I formerly practiced as a lawyer. I'm no longer a practicing lawyer, and of the last 5 years or so, I've been full-time in property and growing the business and making things happen.
Making things happen indeed. And I mean, I have the fortunate advantage of knowing some of the stuff that you've been doing, and I'm looking forward to everyone else kind of hearing a bit more about it. So you're in the Midlands, you say, or East Midlands?
East Midlands, yes.
Yeah. All right. Fabulous. Fabulous. Okay. So there's a few things I personally want to find out about you. And I get the joys of being the one who asks the questions. Might be a disadvantage for yourself, but hey ho. Okay. So why did you decide to actually start in property, really? I'm quite curious. Why property?
I've always had a desire, a want to invest in property. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people on the call this evening. A lot of people want to invest in property in some capacity. And for me personally, I wanted to buy a buy-to-let, do it up if needs be, rent it out, use that income to then save for another property and just do property that way. Because property is one of those stable investments. If you're going to invest in anything, make sure you've got some property behind you. So that's why property for me.
Yeah, and I think that's actually quite interesting, because majority of people that do any sort of investing will mention property in some way or the other. And I'm glad you kind of went through that. And what is your strategy in property?
It's predominantly HMO property management. So that's what we specialized in. So HMO, for those that may not know, is a house of multiple occupancy. So it's where you rent a house, a single house to, let's say, 5, 6, 10 individual tenants. Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure you would have known about all the other different strategies in property, and you decided to go for that one. Is there a reason why you chose that one instead?
Definitely, because when I started out in, getting educated in property, there were lots of property strategies, and there still are. But in terms of management, as opposed to a purchasing route, management is a lot, the barrier to entry is a lot lower. And what I mean by that is, you don't have to have a large capital in order to get started, because you're not purchasing the property already exists. You're simply managing the property. And also you can build your portfolio a lot quicker as well when it comes to management strategies. And HMOs, why HMOs? Because you can make a lot more profit than if you were just to manage a single let property.
That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. Now that's actually quite interesting, because quite a lot of people usually compare HMOs to service accommodation. And it is the case that when you're running an HMO, you're going to make more money than if you're just managing a single let, essentially. But did you guys actually at any point consider SA rather than the HMO, and you chose HMO anyway?
No, we actually did run a serviced accommodation. So we did have an SA, which we ran probably for the best part, probably 8 months to 12 months, I think. So it worked well, beautiful property, absolutely loved it, but actually came to a point of, what do we actually want to do in terms of property, in terms of investing? And just having one SA just there, it was time consuming. And I think when you're starting out in business, you can fall foul of that whole magpie syndrome. Oh, I want to do a bit of SA, I want to do HMO, no, I want to buy property. And I think the whole reason why we had that SA is because we were caught by the whole shiny penny syndrome. So we came to a point to say, okay, what do we want to do? And that at that point, we actually wanted to niche into HMO property management. And so we sold on, we packaged on that SA, got our money back, plus profit. And so yeah, in terms of the difference between SA management, HMO management, you probably know SA more than me, Muzzy, but it's a whole different kettle of fish.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a completely different story, and fair play. And I love the fact that you've pointed out the concept of shiny penny syndrome. Like, you can make money on either one, but then you just got to focus on one, I guess. You're just going to focus on something and make that your niche. And that's really good. And what I want to know is in your process, at this point now, you've decided you're going to be doing HMOs. You've dabbled a little bit into the SAs and decided you just want to focus on HMOs. What were your challenges, especially at getting started? What were your challenges?
Challenges when getting started. When I started, I was actually still working full time as a lawyer. And so the challenges, I would say, is finding time to allow this entrepreneurial streak within me to actually flourish. So finding the time to dedicate to grow the business, that was very challenging in terms of the transition from corporate to entrepreneurial world. Don't believe the hype, oh yeah, I'm just doing 4 hours. Like, you're not going to be doing 4 hours when you first start out. You're not. Maybe down the line potentially, but not when you're starting out. So probably that was one of the main challenges. Also as well, I was starting from ground zero. I had zero property knowledge, zero property experience, zero property connections. I just had this desire to want to do it. So I'd say that's probably another challenge of learning a whole new skill set. Like, I had trained for 6 years to become a lawyer. Property, I had I didn't know anything. And so throwing myself into a whole new arena, that was probably quite challenging, but necessary and doable.
Fair play. You've touched on two things there. Like, don't believe the hype. And majority of us get started in property through education. And I mean, how some of the courses are sold for you to be interested in them is making it seem like it's so easy and you make so much money. And I love that you touched on the fact that it's not as easy as people actually think. And that's one of the biggest challenges, and that's great. And also the fact that you had zero knowledge, like zero property knowledge. Now, in my thought process, and this might be me being very ignorant, but then when you're classed as a lawyer, and it's kind of like one of those positions where you know it all, you know it all. Like, in my head, I'm like, how can you say you didn't know much about property in terms of maybe its legal side, at least you must have some sort of knowledge if you've been training as a lawyer of some sort, right?
Interesting question. When you train as a lawyer, yes, you dabble into so many different areas of law, you know, and then when you practice, obviously you're niched in one area where that's where your legal expertise is. In terms of property, the conveyancing process and purchasing, yes, I had an idea of how that process worked. When I said zero education or knowledge, experience, I'm referring to being creative when it comes to these strategies which are outside of the norm of just buying a property. I think most people can, you know, kind of know how to buy a property, you know, even quite vaguely. So I knew that side of things, but that wasn't the side that I was pursuing as an entrepreneur. I was pursuing a side of how do I grow a portfolio without buying a property? How do I negotiate and create money from nothing? That was the side where I knew nothing, absolutely anything about. Not knew nothing, that's a double negative, isn't it? I believe.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about. So that's where I had to get clued up. And, you know, had I not invested in my property education, I could quite honestly say I probably wouldn't be where I am now, because I didn't know much.
No, it's actually quite interesting, because it's how we see certain things and we make some assumptions, and majority of us actually don't get started because we think we know, and then you realize later on that you don't actually know. The amount of times that we have sat in the same training as estate agents, as letting agents, and you're thinking, well, surely you know everything about this, right? But this creative side that you're talking about is the big thing, where not many people actually understand how you can utilize these strategies to get yourself started, even with no money at all, like you've mentioned. I love the fact that you've pointed that out. Yeah. So I'm kind of gonna go back a little bit on the fact that you've touched on some of the challenges that you've gone through, but the decision to leave the law sort of like trail or the law path itself and deciding to jump over to the entrepreneurial side, how did you make that decision? Is it because of something wrong where you were, or did you just see something else on this side? What exactly was your thought process at that point?
What was my thought process? To be honest, it was quite an easy decision for me, because I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer until I retired. That's something I always knew. So in my career, there was a natural break, and it was, I had a decision. Do I go and apply for another role in another law firm, or do I use this opportunity now to actually continue with this crazy idea of property management, which I've got? And that's what I did. I took the leap and I said, you know what, I'm actually going to pursue this, you know, this entity, which I've already started my training on, you know, whilst I was working full time. I had already started getting educated in property, and it was quite an easy decision for me. A bit scary, don't get me wrong, quite scary at times. And, you know, and some people, probably my grandmother, still thinks I'm crazy to this day, you know, that generation. You know, you're a lawyer, like, what are you doing? And I swear she still tells people that I'm a lawyer when she's on the phone to people. But, you know, it's just, it was an interesting one, but it was a natural decision for me. And I know a lot of people on this group, you know, some of you may be full-time entrepreneurs, you may be thinking, oh gosh, you know, I'm working a corporate job, which I'm, you know, not loving, or you may love it, but want to do something different. There's never going to be a right time to make that change, you know, to make that decision. Because whilst I said, you know, it was quite a natural break for me, I meet a lot of people who are waiting for that time, waiting until they've got this amount of money in the bank, waiting until they connect with this person or find this beautiful property. You just literally have to take action.
Absolutely. I love that. That was going to be one of my questions. At what point did you decide now is the time? Was it like after the 6-year mark, or what exactly was the thought process in terms of this is the right time for me? And I love the answer as well. There isn't a specific time, just do it. And I'm quite intrigued about the change itself and how we spoke about the fact that being a lawyer, being a doctor, being an engineer, these are like highly rated jobs that most parents and grandparents would want their kids and grandkids to go for. And they use that as their own pride to say, my daughter is a lawyer. And then you decide to just let go of that and do this property thing that they don't understand. So it kind of leads to the next question is like, what was the impact on your friends, your family in terms of changing into this? And how did they take it and how did it affect you?
Interesting. I've got quite a few siblings. I'm one of many siblings and one of many sisters and a brother as well. And they were all quite supportive, if I'm being honest. I think I'm one of those siblings that are just, if I make a decision, I just go for it and make it happen. But of course, you know, they would ask questions when I first started out in terms of, you know, what I'm up to. And I couldn't really answer the questions because I didn't actually know what I was up to. I couldn't really explain what I was doing with this property. I couldn't explain why I was going to go and see this landlord to talk about a property because I didn't get it. And a lot of the times what I find is that you do have family and friends that don't get it, that do say things, not necessarily out of, you know, hatred or trying to put you down, but they do say things which can niggle at you and, you know, take away a bit of your confidence. So it was an interesting one, just navigating through that, but just having been steadfast to say, you know, this is what I'm deciding to do. This is my decision, and just watch me fly.
Fair play. I love how you're saying it in a nice way, but basically what you're saying is there are them haters families, right? That don't quite get what you're doing, whether they either don't understand it or they don't like the fact that you're going for a dream that they couldn't reach. Yeah, I know you're not going to mention who they are or exactly what they said, but how are they now that see you where you are?
Oh gosh, that was a good summary, but I can't claim that. I can't claim that. I did not say that. But no, I have been quite fortunate that people within my inner circle that actually matter have been very supportive, and and have been on this journey with me. And as I mentioned, even my grandmother, she'll be asking me questions about the properties, who I've rented them out to. Have I rented it out to a professional this time? Have I rented it out to a company? Wow. It's just a complete shift. And that's because, I didn't force the matter. She's just seeing me be me and just doing what I wanted, what I'm doing. And so people, if they're a bit, on the fence, you just continue to press forward. And when they start seeing results, they'll still be thinking, maybe I can invest a bit of money in her.
Yeah. Oh, that is lovely. That is beautiful. And it's really nice as well. And I completely get where you're coming from, that sometimes it's pointless to try to convince them verbally and explain something, especially at the start, because like you said, I don't understand it either myself. Yeah. I get it and I'm trying to get more of it. And that's not the best position to be in, to try to verbally explain something and convince people. So the best way is to just keep going at it and convince them by being what you want to be. And eventually they will turn around and start asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. So just going to remind any of the guys that just recently joined, thank you very much for joining us. We're just going to be going through a couple of more questions here for Sanchia, and we're going to turn over to yourselves. So if there's any questions that you can think of that you want to ask, maybe you've missed some of it, feel free to ask anyway. If you could use the chat, please, and I will go through them. And if there's any clarity I might need, I'll unmute you and you can explain a bit further. So please, just prepare your questions and add them into the chat, and then we'll be moving over to yourselves very shortly. Okay, so I think I know the answer to this question anyway. However, I'm going to ask, what is your opinion on property education? What's your thoughts on the whole concept?
The whole concept of property education. For me personally, it has been invaluable. As I mentioned before, I don't believe I would be where I am had I not invested substantially into my property education. So in terms of the whole idea of being educated, I always tell people, get educated. I don't necessarily recommend specific providers, because I've trained with quite a few. They all have their pros and cons, so I don't tend to name names. But if you were to just Google, a lot of the big players would come up. of course, certain providers may not be as ethical or as moral or operates in the ways that they should. But for me personally, just go out. What I would say is speak to people, go to places or organizations that are highly recommended in order to gain your education. And, you know, there's a lot of things that you can learn from YouTube, from networking with people, but do not underestimate putting your money where your mouth is when it comes to getting educated in property. Because when you slap down that couple grand on that course, like it makes you want to do something, you know? So, just, you know, if you were to go into any profession, you know, you wouldn't think, oh yeah, I'm not going to train to be a plumber or train to be a lawyer. And let me just watch you. Let me not pay for my education. Let me just go on YouTube. You know, you wouldn't do that. You would pay, you would invest, and you go on this course or whatever it is. So it's the same for property. If you're wanting to go out there and be a professional property investor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I'm pretty sure you understand the whole idea behind it and why the question is being asked anyway, because as you've put it really well, about any other profession, you would actually pay for training, you would pay for certain things, and you're not just doing it for a certificate, you're doing it because you really need to know what you're doing before you actually go in and jump into it, right? And unfortunately, yes, there are some training companies that are not quite great or reputable, but the whole concept of education is ideal. It's vital for your success. And I'm glad to see that it's made a difference for your property journey. And I'm hoping this is sort of like ringing bells to certain people that might think, I'm not going to invest in any of my training. I might as well just go and purchase a property with that money. So it makes a difference. I'm glad you shared that. Thanks a lot for that.
That's fine.
Okay.
But I would add on to that. People have succeeded without paying X amount of money for training courses. People have succeeded. So I'm just sharing my journey in terms of how I have benefited from investing in my property education. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So in what you've achieved now so far, in the amount of properties that you have, in the amount of cash flow you've generated, in all the successes that you would class as successes in your whole journey, if you were to roll back the years, let's say you go back and speak to Sanchia back when you were about to start, based on what you've learned so far, what are the things that you would tell yourself?
Good question. One that makes me reflect. What would I tell myself? I would tell myself to show up sooner. And what I mean by that is, don't let fear hold you back. Easier said than done, I get it, but fear has its place. But if you literally allow yourself to be gripped by fear, where it doesn't allow you to go into a networking environment, it doesn't allow you to go into a property training room and get educated, like it's just going to hinder you from moving forward. So I would tell myself, it doesn't matter that you don't know it, that you don't know, you know, that you don't know much right now. Go to the networking event now, go to, you know, X, Y, and Z, speak to this person, speak to that person, because at some stage they were where I was, you know, or where I am, you know, if I take myself back 5 years. So just show up sooner, get out there.
Fair play. I love that. And with such questions for people that are now successful in the property world, you would expect that they would go back and say, or save up a little bit more money, or like work a little bit harder and stuff like that. But you're talking about a mental challenge in terms of the fear, because the amount of things that you do in your success are based on your belief in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's really, really good to hear you talk about the concept of the fear, because I know a few people are not doing certain things now, not necessarily because they don't have the money, not necessarily because they don't have the resources. It's kind of like a bit of something to hide behind, that, oh, I don't have enough money, or I don't know enough. It's the fear, right?
Definitely.
And I love that.
What I'd add on to that, you know, sometimes, you know, money isn't our limitation, it's our mind. It really is our mind a lot of the times, because when looking at certain property strategies, you actually don't need money to get involved. And I know lots of people have, on this call have probably heard that. Is that even true? Can you even make money from properties that you don't own? Can you even make money from properties where you've not put anything in? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So, it's an interesting one when it comes to thinking about, can I do this? Is this possible? Or are you just creating barriers and blockages in your mind as an excuse for not actually taking the action to move forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I usually say, if you think money is the reason you can't get started or you can't do a certain thing, if the money were to be given to you now, what would be the next challenge? Then that's the challenge. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I love that. I love that. So I've got one more question, and I can see we're getting a bit more active now in the chat. So we'll come back to you guys. So this question kind of ties into the question that I've asked previously. Now, this time I'm asking a little bit for advice for the starter. So for the guys that are listening in now that are thinking, I'm considering doing property now, I want to get started, I want to be where Sanchia is right now. So what would be some tips that you can share with us, please, so we can actually get in and get started? What's the top tips you can think of right now?
Top tips, I would say, invest in your education. Now, that could be a range of things. It could be, listening to podcasts, for example, listening to YouTube channels. It could be reading books. It could be going to networking events. It could be paying for your formal property education. It's get educated. Start to think as a professional property investor. That's probably my main thing, I would say, for people new to property. Secondly, when you learn something, implement it, because it doesn't matter how many courses you go to, how many podcasts you read, unless you actually implement it, take action, what's the point? And so definitely implementation of what you learn is definitely key, and networking as well. Networking is a big one. And a lot of you, if you are new to property on this group and you're thinking, well, what do I do when I go to a networking event? What do I even say? You're just going as a normal person. You don't have to say, oh, hi, I'm Sanchia Miller and I've got a 1.5 million property portfolio. Like, no, hi, I'm Sanchia Miller, starting out in property, and, just connecting with people on a level. You don't actually have to talk about property, but you're connecting with people who are doing what you want to do. That is the main thing when it comes to property. Rubbing shoulders with people who are doing what you want to do, but successfully as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Love that. So get yourself in networking events, get to rub shoulders with people that are doing what you want to be doing. And then you can actually get to learn from what they're doing. And that is fantastic. Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to start going into the chat and going through the messages that people have been asking. I can see more people have joined now. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for joining. So I'll go through the messages now and see what questions we've got. Okay. So Maiva Varaizo says, when talking about more profits than single lets, what percentages are we talking about at the moment?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So I think we're at the start when we're talking about managing an HMO generates more money than managing a single let. When talking about more profits than a single let, what percentages are we talking about? Okay,
so in terms of, if you were to take a single let here in the Midlands, you could probably rent out a single let. Let's keep figures very simple, £600. So if you let that property out for £600 to a tenant, and you agree that your management fee for that property, because remember, we're dealing with management here, controlling an asset. If your management fee is 10%, you're making £60 a month for managing that property. If you've got a HMO and your management fee, your percentage for managing the property is 10% again, but your gross rents, your total rents that you're getting in is £2,500, for example, you're making £250 for managing that property. Does that make sense? So same 10% management fee, but because your income from that property is substantially different, your percentage, your income, your profit from that property is obviously increases.
Okay, my moderator, you are now unmuted. Does that make sense?
It certainly does, and thank you very much for explaining that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Awesome, great question, great question. Right then, next question is from Charlene. At what point after starting your property journey would you say your profits monthly matched your lawyer wage?
Ooh, at what point? Took a while. It didn't happen overnight, put it that way. I would say a few years in.
Yeah.
A few years in, you know, it wasn't an overnight success. A few years in, that's the answer.
Yeah,
that one.
I love that. And it's good to just be open and honest about this, where people think, you know, I can replace my job overnight, so I can replace my job in a few weeks based on how these things are presented. So it's not a get rich quick. So great question there, Charlene. Charlene.
I was going to say, what I also will add on to that, although you may not match the salary that you were on, you know, compared to your corporate job, for example, think about all the other benefits that you're getting. You know, whilst your salary may not be matched just yet, the freedom that you have, you know, the creativity that you have to be creating the life that you want, there's so much more that's part of the journey as opposed to just the figure. You know, you'll get to that figure at some point if you continue, but it's just such a beautiful journey on the whole.
Absolutely, and that's brilliant. So it's not just about matching your wages, it's the lifestyle that you create whilst you do that as well. And you become a far better person because you're embarking in something completely new. You become a different person in the process as well. Love that. Great question there, Shah. Shah's got another question. What kind of HMOs do you run? Student or professional? If both, which one do you prefer and why?
Professionals. Professionals all day, every day. Why? Because I just personally was more geared towards the professional lets, and I think as well, sometimes when you're dealing with professionals as opposed to students, it just seemed a lot more easier than having to deal with students. I think maybe a bit of the stereotypes that you hear about students. I know sometimes you get some great students. I was once a student, but professionals was probably best. And I think the answer to that question as well is geared towards what your goal is. You know, what do you want to achieve through property? How much profit do you want to make? Because of course the rents are different depending on what your tenant type is, depends on where you're investing, you know. So I think because of where we invest as well, that also has a heavy bearing on the tenant type that you also go for. So we let to professionals. I hope that's answered your question.
I think it does indeed. I've just had the thumbs up. It does answer the question. In terms of that actually, in terms of professionals and students, isn't there like an extra benefit in terms of council tax and stuff for managing students, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there is, you know, there's pros and cons for both. You know, they say, well, you know, when it comes to students, you just let it out in October, for example, and they take it on for the whole year into the summer break. And, you know, you don't pay X certain fees, but you've got to look at it as a whole. You know, do your research, look at it as a whole. There's pros and cons to both, but professionals works quite well for us.
That is brilliant. Thank you very much. The next question is from Sanchia. Sanchia says, at what point did you fully leave your employment? And how many properties were you running at this point? And how were you balancing your work and being a business person?
Wow, lots of questions.
Lots of questions in one there.
That one there, but no, they're great questions. So sorry, just break it down. I think there were 3 questions there. What was the first one?
The first one is, at what point did you leave your full-time employment?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I left my full-time employment quite early on in my property journey. And to be honest, the reason I left, as I mentioned, there was a natural break in my career, but also I wanted the time, because had I gone to another role, you know, as a lawyer, I would have been restricted by my time as well. And so I left the profession and I actually went on to do several other jobs. You know, I signed up to an agency. I worked in education for a period. I worked in just several different agencies. Why? Because I needed to top up my income. But what did it give me? it gave me time. It gave me clarity, you know, it gave me space to actually think about how I can grow my property business. So for me personally, I didn't just go straight from a lawyer straight to full-time property. I'm sure some people have, but that wasn't my journey. So that's how I bridged the gap.
Okay, interesting. So the next question kind of then becomes different to answer it, because it's how many properties were you running at the point? Because at the point that you left being a lawyer wasn't the point that you went full-time.
No.
So how many properties were you running? Do you even remember how many properties you were running at the time that you left being a lawyer?
Maybe one, maybe one property, because we secured the first property quite early on. You know, so we did our marketing. You know, when you go to the property training and they say, yes, send out your marketing to this list, that list, and landlord. So we did our batch of marketing, and from that list, we, you know, a landlord called us, and we're still managing that property to today. It's like from our first ever batch of marketing.
Wow.
And so, you know, we were quite fortunate that we did secure a property at that time. But yeah, I think probably one property, possibly two, but yes.
That's awesome. So a lot of people would be thinking, yeah, I'll probably be managing about 10 properties by the time I leave. Hopefully it gives me the cash flow that I can sort of replace my income, then I can comfortably jump out. You're thinking one property, I'm done. See ya.
But everyone's story is different. That's
Absolutely.
the thing. That's the beauty of this entrepreneurial journey. Everyone's story is different. You know, for some people, you know, you may say, you know, I need 5 properties before I can make that decision. So it's based on what works for you as an individual. And it's kind of putting your blinkers on, not getting caught up about what other people are doing, what other people are posting, and actually seeing what actually works for me.
Yeah.
But equally, not holding yourself back, saying, gosh, when I get 5, okay, when I get 7, then I'll leave. You know, so it's making that decision when it's right for you, but not holding yourself back.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to the fear bit that you were talking about before, right?
Definitely.
Like holding yourself back. This is just a follow-up question from Shangy's questions here. Were there any interchangeable skills that you picked up from the different jobs? We can only imagine, like, as a lawyer, in terms of understanding terms and conditions and contracts and stuff, that stuff that you would really hone into in the property world. Are there any other interchangeable skills that you brought into your business?
Yes, as you mentioned, reading contracts, etc. Negotiations was definitely one. Having confidence was one as well. I think sometimes we can undermine the significance of being confident in what you're doing. So I think that's definitely a quality. Skill-wise, I think the main thing was, you know, being able to read contracts, understand terms, read between the lines and understand what people are actually saying, and just being playing hardball when it comes to negotiations. But of course, going for win-win, but just knowing what you want.
Exactly.
That was definitely something that I could transfer.
Because yeah, for some of us, something as simple as reading a contract and understanding what it's saying is actually a big thing, to be honest. They will actually get other people to read. We know how to read English, but they use words that just baffle the life out of us. Like, what does that even mean? So I can.
Again, you know, you don't, I guess I can only do that because of my background, but don't let that hold you back. You know, there are people that can assist you with that. Of course, there are lawyers that can help you with that. So again, that's just another piece of the pie. Don't think, oh God, I'm not good at that, therefore I can't do this. There's going to be so many transferable skills in all the different industries and all the different jobs that you're currently doing, for those on this call. So there's going to be loads of different elements that you can pull out. For example, empathy. If you've got a lot of empathy, some tenants need a lot of empathy. You know, and so you may be great dealing with tenants.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you actually pointed that out, because I know quite a few landlords who do not put tenants and empathy in the same sentence.
Precisely.
Like, no, don't empathize with them. They haven't paid me rent for 3 months. I don't care.
But it's finding that balance. It's finding that balance. And a lot of people naturally have those skills and some people don't. So again, you know, there's so many things that you can pull out from your profession.
That is so true. That is so true. Thank you very much for that. I hope that kind of answers the question for you, Sanchia. Next question is by Charlene again. What has been your biggest and toughest lesson throughout the journey?
Biggest and toughest lesson.
Sorry. I don't know if Sanchia actually answered, like, how did she manage to balance having a job and having to run a business? Perhaps you did answer, but perhaps I kind of like got lost in between the lines, because that's for me, I think that's what is quite a big thing.
Okay, I'm not quite sure if I caught all of that.
That was the third question in that big question, in terms of how did you balance running a business and being able to actually do your job, so to speak.
So how did I balance working full-time whilst starting my own
whilst
business?
you're running the business? Yeah.
It was crazy. If I'm honest, it was crazy. I'll be working, starting probably work at 8 a.m. It is in my job, probably finish at 6 p.m. and, starting on my business from 7 p.m. to 12 p.m. Like, it was absolutely crazy in terms of how I had to find time to put in the business. Now, everyone's circumstance is different. Everyone's got different responsibilities, etc. But what I always say to people, you will find time for the things that you want to do. You will find time for the things that you value. So whilst a lot of people may say, I don't have a lot of time, which is true. We are very busy people. But if you really want something, for me personally, I really did not want to retire as a lawyer, and I knew I didn't. So I knew I had to do something about it. And so working after work, before work, it was hard, but I had a vision, and that's what I wanted to do.
That is fabulous. Does that answer your question there, Sanchia?
But how did she manage to maintain her sanity during that period when she was working all those crazy hours? Did you find that you were losing yourself, or were you sort of like in control the whole time?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, we couldn't actually hear you properly there, Sanchia.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, can you hear me now?
A little.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's better.
Okay. So what I'm saying is seeing that you were working all those crazy hours, was there a point where you actually lost yourself, or, how did you maintain your sanity having to work up until 12 midnight, like on a regular basis, and not having a breather?
How did I keep my sanity? Did I? But no, in terms of, you've got, I don't want to sound patronizing in any way, but you've just got to work it. Like, of course, there were days, it wasn't Monday to Friday that I worked from 7 till 12 p.m. every day, every week. There were periods of times where I did, but there were periods of times where I knew I just needed to have a break. And one thing I'd say is, when you're on this entrepreneurial journey, if you were to take a week out of not doing anything, like, the world doesn't end. In the grand scheme of things, you're still building, if that makes sense. So what I found is that even for myself, when I didn't work on the business for, like, I don't know, 3 days straight or 4 days straight, I'd be kicking myself and feeling a bit guilty. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look back 5 years, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But in terms of how to balance it mentally, I personally don't have the answer for that. I just know what I did, and I just put in the hours. And when I felt like I was going to have a breakdown in terms of what's it called? Not a mental breakdown, but when you feel physically tired, I'd have a break, and I'm not advising that people do that, but that was just my journey.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because I think it's things that people actually overlook and they don't talk about, but I think it's also so very important that we do talk about these things, because they do happen. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing. That was really useful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. but yes, just find a rhythm that works for you. Working 7 till 12 p.m. may not work for you. Putting in an hour each day. I think the main point is being consistent with whatever you're putting in, hours, time-wise, value-wise into your business. It's the consistency that counts, because, you know, doing 7 till 12 for 5 days straight and then not doing anything for 2 months probably isn't the best thing. But if you were to do an hour 3 times a week, that probably would make the difference.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
Awesome. Great questions there, Shane. Thanks for bringing them up. Okay, so Charlene was saying, what has been your biggest and toughest lesson throughout your journey?
Biggest and toughest lesson. The feeling of rejection isn't great. I'd say that. When you're sending out marketing campaigns and letters to landlords so you can say, hey, I'm Sanchia and I'm a property manager, give me your property. You don't get responses half the time, and not being able to, just rejection, hearing no after no after no after no, it's challenging. And to continue to persevere in the face of that, that's a big challenge. But as they say, for every no that you get, you're closer to your yes. And so hopefully that's answered your question.
Charlene, are you there?
It does. Thank you so much. And thank you
Welcome.
for so far.
Brilliant. Oh, that's a big topic. That is a topic on its own. So in terms of rejection, we could talk for hours about that. But yeah, fair play to you. Fair play to you. Okay, the next question I've got is from Silas. Silas says, oh, this is an interesting one. Do you think property education providers should be regulated or accredited?
Oh, gosh.
What a question. Oh, my gosh.
Should they be regulated or accredited? I don't know. I don't know. I've gone through the system and they're not regulated or accredited. And I've got out of it what I need to get out of it, if that makes sense. Would it help if they were in certain aspects? Because there are people, of course, who haven't been as fortunate when they go through property investing, when they invest thousands of pounds and, they've not received what they thought they would, etc. So, you probably will move towards being regulated at some point. Will it help? Possibly, yes, I'm sure it would. My personal opinion, if it happens, it happens, that's my answer to that question. But I'm sure it will move to be regulated to help those people who are, I would say, probably fall into the vulnerable bracket, or who probably have been, not been as fortunate when it comes to investing in property education. Because there are some horror stories. There are. And hopefully if it does go into regulation or, go into being accredited, then it will help those matters.
True. Yeah, it's an interesting one, this one. And to be fair, there are some property training companies that I know of that are actually actively seeking accreditation, getting certification for what they provide, which is quite noble of them, considering it's not a legal requirement.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting concept and a great question there. But I love what you said, like, just go through the system, get what you need to get out of it for your own best sort of purpose, what it is that you need, and not focus too much on what's not going to help you. Even though there are horror stories, if you're unfortunately one of them, you can either hold on to it and make it the thing that stops you from moving on, or you can use it as a fuel to know who not to work with and just push on and actually get to what you want to be. So fair play to you, and great question, Silas. Thank you very much for bringing it up. I hope that answers the question for you from Sanchia's point of view. Right, okay, so whose is the next question? Okay, this isn't a question. Fear of failing versus the excitement of success awaiting. I think that's a comment that you made earlier on, Sanchia, in terms of the fear that holds you back in actually looking at what excites you going forward, and use that as a push. Yeah, absolutely.
And just to add on to that, I believe there's a quote by Winston Churchill, and he said, success is going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. Like, failure is part of the journey. And so, yeah, it's balancing that fear of failure and embracing the fact that I have to fail in order to win. I have to. It's part of the journey. And so failure, rejection, you know, get used to it.
That's interesting. Going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. Wow. Wow. I love that. Kind of sounds like insanity at the same time as well, doesn't it?
Precisely.
That's great. Maria Adams says, how did you manage? I mean, you touched on this question actually earlier on. It's a similar question to Senyi's, but I'll just ask anyway. How did you manage the property? How did you manage property and your full time while you're actually in a job?
Yeah, I think it's just being a lot more conscious about how I use my time as well, and just the education that I obtained. A lot of it does give you a blueprint essentially about what to do and when to do it at what stages. So, you know, if I had a stressful day at work, you know, I may not do anything on the business, but equally, if I felt quite energized to get some stuff done in the business, I would do small chunks, because that's what property education does give you. A lot of the times it gives you a blueprint, it breaks it down to what needs to be done. So if you can do things in manageable chunks, it does help you to navigate your way through when balancing life and working and kids and partners and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to you know, the mastermind, what you were talking about in terms of rubbing shoulders with people that have done what you are looking to do. And what I noticed is initially when you start with the property education or whatever it is that you're looking to do, how you're getting yourself educated, you're looking at that one person. But then once you start networking and you figure out that, gosh, there's loads of us looking to do this stuff. Some of us are like further ahead. You start learning from them in terms of, well, how did you do that? How did you do that? And you learn different skills that you can utilize. And what I found was in terms of the networks, the masterminds, the education, they gave me that push. Because on your own, you might feel as if, as you just touched on, that if I have a bad day at work, I might not do anything in my business. But then in not doing anything in my business, I'm kind of sabotaging myself. So you get that energy boost from speaking to other people that are in your same position, and you find a way.
Yeah.
You find a way.
And when you, it's interesting because when we caught up for coffee, I think it was sometime way before lockdown, you were telling us some horror stories about your essays, and you know, I was thinking, gosh, I've had it quite easy, you know, in comparison to this guy. So you know, it's you know, it's interesting when you're connecting with certain people and you're hearing their stories, you think, okay, well, and if they can do it, I can do it as well. So you know, it's a good thing.
You give each other that extra push, don't you?
Oh yeah.
And it's really lovely. And I would recommend it 100%, just like what Sanchia has been saying. Just network with people. You'll be amazed at the extra things that you get besides just the knowledge, just that extra boost of actually looking at someone and thinking, you know, if you've achieved it, so can I, type thing.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thanks for your question, Maria. The next question is from Mumbai. Do you ever miss your profession? Did you ever consider pursuing your business while still keeping your profession?
Had I considered it? Yes, I had considered it. Did I want it? No, I didn't want to do it. And again, it goes back to what was the end goal? Like, what did I actually want to do? You know, so some people have said, well, you know, had you stayed in the profession until you had grown your business a bit more, then you wouldn't have to have gone and done, you know, other things to supplement your income. But I was looking at the bigger picture, and what I gained was time, and time is invaluable. You can't put a price on time. And, you know, that's what I got from leaving the profession and just going full force in terms of this entrepreneurial journey.
Fair. I hope that answers your question, Vimbai. Right. Quinton has a question. Quinton's your local,
that's
actually.
great. Thank you.
Awesome, Vimbai. Thanks. Quinton is your local. It says, what systems are you using to manage your multiple HMOs?
System. Gosh, it's all just in the head. Everything's just in the head. No, just simple systems, Google Docs, Google Sheets, just having things quite easily accessible, not investing in all this singing and dancing, CRMs or whatever you want to call it, just keeping things simple, particularly when you're starting out. Just have things in one place. And a lot of the times when it comes to documents, just make sure you've got a folder where you can put all the documents in, whatever works for you, but don't think you have to have all these singing and dancing equipment and things. You can get by without it.
It's really interesting now you actually touched on that, because a lot, I was in the similar position as well, where I thought once you have a certain amount of properties, you have to step it up, go into these systems that you can't even pronounce anymore. And yet you've got people that are still running massive $1 million portfolios with an Excel document. It's as simple as that. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, just do what works for you, but keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And I love that. I hope that answers that question, Quentin.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for that question as well. Okay. Tabo says, besides management, are you also buying HMOs in your investment area?
Not yet. That's the short answer to that question. And that's the goal. That's one thing that I would be pursuing. But what I'd say for those in the group who may not have the money to buy properties just yet, do consider management strategies, because you can, get cash flow from that to then supplement your income, which will then help you to build a pot of money if you are wanting to then go and purchase.
Absolutely. And that's great. I hope that answers your question there, Tabo. Thanks for that question. Awesome. Tabo says yes. Okay. Right. I apologize in advance if I pronounce this wrong. Ramaya Ubiaro says, what would your advice be to an 18-year-old trying to get into property? Wow. I'm going to ask you to unmute if you're still there. Is it Ramaya or Ramia? Okay. Sorry?
Shall I answer whilst she may be
Yeah,
unmuting
if you could, please, if you could.
For an 18-year-old, first of all, if you are 18, wanting to get into property at this stage, well done. Great age, I would say, nice and young. And to be honest, it's the same advice I'd give to anyone who was 52, for example, or 68, it's the same advice. Get educated, invest in your education, implement what you learn, take action, network. It's the same advice, because the systems don't change. The systems stay the same in terms of how to succeed in property.
Absolutely, and I second that as well. And Maya, if you are asking about yourself, not your child, well done, very well done. I wish I was there. Oh my gosh, I wish I was 18, considering the information that I'm picking up here from Sanchia. Okay, so next question is from Maivarezo again. While managing the properties, do you source workmen for your repairs?
Yeah.
Or do you go out and do it yourself?
That's a good one. I've been known to change a few toilet seats, but in terms of workmen, work people, yes, I do source them. And yes, I have had my own horror stories over the years. And when it comes to builders walking off site mid refurb, painters that you pay to paint that don't actually end up painting, I do have my own horror stories. So yes, I do source the workmen, and it's trial and error. You can go on, check a trade or recommendations, you're still going to get those bad eggs. And it's only over a period of time after you've used 24 electricians that you actually find one that actually works. So, it's a process of time where you can sift through those people that you find are reliable and that you can actually work with.
Yeah.
But I have gotten my hands dirty in some things.
I can actually picture that. I'm not even going to argue with it. I can see you changing a toilet seat. Fair play. I couldn't. I couldn't. The problem is I would go and try it, and then I'd have to get a professional come and change the things that I've done wrong. So let's not waste time. Just get someone who knows what they're doing.
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you one story actually. We had a tenant that was checking in, and the toilet seat was broken and we didn't have a replacement. And so we thought, oh, let's take this toilet seat away because it doesn't look great. It's quite unsightly. And then we'll just explain to the tenant, you know, that the toilet seat will be replaced the next day. So we ended up with a toilet seat, you know, not brand new, used toilet seat in our lap whilst I'm driving in my car, because there wasn't a bin, because we thought that when we would have left the property, there would be a bin that, you know, that we could put this toilet seat in. 0 bins. So we're like, what we're going to do? We're going to, what, just ditch the toilet seat? And no, we ended up putting the toilet seat in my car, driving to where we're going, and then finding a bin to put the toilet seat in. So that's just one of the stories.
Property is glitz and glamour, people, right? Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. We live on islands out here, living the life. Nothing to do with taking toilet seats to different bins, and oh my gosh. That's like typical property problems, ain't it?
Oh yeah.
Find yourself carrying a toilet seat. Oh, beautiful. Okay, next question is from Beauty Coles. She says, how big is your property portfolio now?
Big. We've currently got around 50 rooms when it comes to HMOs, so 50 units. And also we're in the process of securing a portfolio of 40 properties. Not going to give much more details into that, but literally, you know, as we speak, negotiations are taking place. So, you know, things are happening. But what I would say, guys, don't get too caught up in the size of someone's portfolio, because you could have 10 properties, but they're not actually cash flowing as good as they should. It's about growing an efficient and stable portfolio, because it's not about how many properties you have. You could have 10 single lets, or you could have 10 HMOs, which completely different cash flow strategies. So it's not focused on how big a portfolio is, it's about how efficient each property is running.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that you've just nailed it there, where people actually will look at the amount of properties you've got or amount of rooms you have and make this great assumption that you're making loads of money. But if it's not marketed right, if it's not priced right, you could have 50 liabilities rather than assets. So thanks for pointing that out. Hope that answers your question there, Beauty. I noticed you just unmuted.
She said, thank you very much in the comments.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, our next question is from Chrissy. This is amazing. I agree. Networking is so powerful and can open doors. Oh, it's not a question, it's a comment. Thank you very much, Chrissy. Completely agree with that. Maria says, thank you. Tabo says, you spoke about marketing for someone. What's the most effective marketing method you use to reach landlords with a high conversion rate?
Most effective? When it comes to HMO, landlords who own HMOs, then it would be the HMO register, because that's a list of landlords who own HMOs in a particular area. So if you're, you know, different councils have different criteria as to whether you can connect with them, how you can connect with them. So of course, follow each council's guidelines, but the main thing that you want to do is connect with landlords directly, like directly who own these properties.
Yeah. And I mean, once you've got the register itself, and what do you do? Do you send leaflets? Do you send letters? Do you ring them?
Ordinarily, it would be marketing material, so predominantly letters. But of course, what I would say in terms of using that method, make sure that you are compliant in terms of how you go about using the details on the forms.
Yeah. I mean, we're running out of time. I would love to delve into the compliance element, but guys, please take note of that and look it up in terms of your compliance when you're actually, especially when you're using people's details. Okay, how did you develop your power team? Slowly over time or quickly and intentionally at the start, Wimbai says?
Slowly and painfully. That's how
Slowly and painfully.
That's you know, to be honest, you do get individuals who you start out with. For example, I've got a handyman who has kind of been there from day one, and you know, he's still soldering on in terms of being reliable and, you know, very, very helpful in terms of the property portfolio. Whereas others, it's taken a lot of time, you know, years, probably 3 years or so, to get those steady gas guy, to get the electrical engineer, you know, to get a good cleaners for HMOs. So the power team, it's something that evolves over time.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. Thank you very much. Quentin is asking about the amount of properties we're managing. We've gone through that. Tabo says, I love your answer. It's efficiency over quantity. And this is talking about how many properties you own or any that you're managing. Beauty says, thank you very much. Norma Tolo says, how many years have you been in property in the business?
5 years.
5 years. But do you feel like they're long years, or do you feel like it actually just flown by?
When you're in the thick of it, sometimes it feels long, very, very long. But you know, in hindsight, you know, looking back, it seems, yeah, it has gone pretty quickly. And you know, there's been a lot of highlights and things which I have enjoyed, parts of it where I haven't enjoyed, but overall it seems to have gone quite quick, but enjoyable.
Fair play, fair play. I think that's a great question there, Norma. Thank you very much. Sheila says, very insightful. Thank you very much. Oh, I love this one. Cool says, hi, I've just joined. Chrissy kindly shared the link. Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks, Cool. I am Cool and a lawyer too, making the transaction from lawyer to an SA business.
Wow.
Ooh, this is great. What tips would you give to someone making that transition? You'd be the best positioned person to give tips on this one, wouldn't you?
So that's transitioning what from being a
lawyer to doing a service accommodation business, so essentially property investing.
You know what? I'm going to say the same thing I've said from the beginning. Get educated, implement what you've learned, take action, network. That's the advice I would give.
I'm just reading a template now. This is like the answer to every question. Get educated.
But it's true. That is the foundation in terms of making that transition. And what I'll say, called that, you know, I think it's called ask the question. Mm-hmm. There's never a right time. Know what works for you. But again, don't restrict yourself. Don't hold yourself back.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, welcome, Cool. Thank you very much for that great question. Hopefully that has helped out. Cool says, I'm in the gym, so the camera is off. Enjoy your gym session as well. So that's great. I think I've actually come to the end of the questions. Yes, we've come to the end of the questions. Thank you very much. So for those that are joining for the first time, like Cool, we do finish this at 7 o'clock at the latest, but any earlier would be even better. So just wanted to say thank you very much for all the questions that you have asked. We might have a minute or two for one more question. For anyone who has a burning question, and it needs to be a good one, no pressure, guys. If anyone's got a really good question, a burning question, drop it in the chat now. Sanchia is okay to answer one more question before we shoot. But otherwise, in the meantime, I'm just going to say thank you very much for what you've shared. This has just been amazing. I'm going to be watching this back again as if I wasn't part of it. So it's been some really, really good gems that you've shared in terms of your journey coming out of your prestigious job. We still look at it as prestigious, like being a lawyer is like everyone wants to be a lawyer. It's so cool. We've been watching Criminal Minds and Suits for a long time. We want to be like that. So it's been great listening to your story. It's been fantastic. Right, we've got some questions, I think. Okay, not a question, but just to say a big thank you. This is just amazing. I second that. Thank you, says Shelly. Taka says, talking about education, what is self-taught or you went to a proper school? So we're talking about the element of education. I guess we're splitting this. It's like there's some stuff that you self-taught, there's some stuff that you had to go out and learn. What are the things that you would say you self-taught, and what are the things that you would say you went to get educated? That's an interesting question, Taka. Thank you.
Good question. I don't think, I think I just went out to get educated. So I got the education. And then there were certain aspects of it where I had to do my own research to delve into certain parts, because when you go to these courses, a lot of the times it's quite high level. They do give you some information, but it still requires you to go out there and put some more effort in to get a better understanding about what you've learned. So I'd say, first of all, I went out, got the education, and then a lot of the things I did have to, you know, self-teach myself to understand that I understood it.
Absolutely. I think that's the best way to actually put it, essentially. I think that's a very interesting question. I had never actually thought about that, the self-taught part and what you actually pick up, but very well answered. I love this next question. I was going to stop the questions and say that was the last one, but I love this next one. Norma says, thank you so much for all the information that you've shared. It's been great. I would like to ask about the networking element. When starting, where are the best places to look for such events? Where would you recommend she goes?
I would say just Google property events in your area. So whatever area you live in, just Google property events, and a lot will probably come up. Even if one comes up, just go to that one event, because what I find is that when you go to an event, the people that you meet will then say, oh, I've been to this event, or I've done this. And then you would just broaden your options in terms of where you would like to go. But the main thing I'd say, just go to one event, and you'd be surprised at what connections you make, what you learn from the event. But I think just simply Googling property networking in your area should do the trick.
That's brilliant. And I would actually say the same thing as well. When I initially found out about events, when someone mentioned it, it was such a foreign thing to me. And I was convinced that that's not something that even happens in my area. But as you said, when I actually Googled, you'll be surprised how many events run literally outside your doorstep.
Yeah.
Like, there is loads of them. So it's good to actually just go on Google, type in property networking events in my area, and you'll see how many will pop up. It's usually in the evening. Some of them, they do breakfast ones as well. So there's random ones, loads of them. And like Sanchia says, whatever you find, go to it. Even if you have to pay 20 quid to go, just go to it. Have conversations with those people, and that will absolutely change the trajectory of your journey. I would recommend that as well. So I'm going to be brave enough here to just stop. Right? I'm going to stop at this point, because you're sharing so many gems. It's each question and each answer is generating another question. We're just going to stop ourselves from asking, because we'll be here all night. So it's absolutely amazing to listen to your journey, and thank you very much for taking your time to come and share it. I know you've got something that you're rushing for straight after this, so I'm not going to delay you anymore. And on behalf of the ZPI team, thank you very, very much for sharing. And this will be on YouTube, so people who couldn't make it today will be able to catch up. And thank you again for the people that are actually part of this as well, for your engagement. It's been absolutely amazing. And is there anything else that you might want to say to us, Sanchia, before we close?
What I would say, first of all, thank you everyone for the great questions. Thank you for being so friendly and welcoming. And for anyone, I mean, everyone's come onto this call for a reason. Whether it is that you're wanting to leave your corporate profession and start your entrepreneurial journey, or you may not want to leave. You may love what you do and want to start something on the side. So I hope that you've taken something from this. I'm more than happy to connect with you. I'm on Instagram, which is Sanchia_Miller_. So you can connect with me there. You could ask me questions if you've not managed to ask your question here this evening. So I look forward to connecting with a lot of you, and all the very best with all of you who have a dream that you want to go out and fulfill.
Fabulous. That's amazing. So for anyone who is in our networks, when we post this out, we will have all of Sanchia's handles, so you can actually connect with her. So on the YouTube video, on the comments, or on the description, you will have the contact details as well. So you can actually connect with Sanchia and get to learn a bit more about what she does. And we'll just take it from there. Thank you very much again. And I'm going to stop recording now.